Hello and welcome to the Empowered Curiosity podcast. I'm so excited because I'm actually recording with an actual live human being today. Instead of doing this virtually, my bestie Christina has met me here in Nevada. It's my birthday week at the time of this recording, and we're going to talk all about the fire element, the summer season, and how that applies to your spiritually aligned business. And so there's a lot that we're going to cover today. As we were drinking coffee this morning, we sort of did a bit of an overview. So we're going to be talking about the concept of Shen, which is our word for spirit in the Taoist tradition, and how that applies to business and all of these beautiful elements that we just talked about. And we're also going to be talking about what the concept of a pause is during summertime and how that's different from a pause in the wintertime. And I'm sure that we're going to ebb and flow in that space, and we'll just sort of see what comes up. So thank you so much for being here, Christina.
Thank you for having me here. Yeah, this is pretty amazing and pretty appropriate. We're, I'm from the West Coast, and here we are in Nevada, and it's going to be 41 degrees today. So it's a good time to talk about the element of summer and heat and sunshine and yang, and the environment is very appropriate for this episode.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't Canadian, 41 is low hundreds in Fahrenheit, so it is very, very warm, very long. Yeah.
It gets hot. Mm-hmm. And it affects your mood, it affects your body, it affects the rhythm of your day, and we're on a farm here. We're on the ranch that you've been at, which is amazing because we have this opportunity to watch the natural environment and then all the animals and how they behave in the different rhythms of the season. And that's been really fascinating. And we're animals, and sometimes we get a little more removed from our immediate seasons and our immediate environment. So it's fun to come to these places and watch what nature does with the elements and left to its own devices. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And just as a bit of a precursor, for those of you who just are meeting us here, Christina has been on the podcast, I don't even know how many times, like multiple times now.
A full season and then a bit.
So we do a seasonal talk every, at the equinox and solstices. And last year we did a bit of a generalized overview of like what Taoist medicine says about the summer season fire element. So if you want to check out that episode, it's episode 47. And so you'd have to go back in the archives a bit. But today's conversation, because we have shifted from just sort of a general sense of what Taoist medicine says about the seasons and more into how we can apply that into our spiritual businesses. So today's going to be of course, it's going to be talking about spirit, because how do we not talk about spirit? But it's going to be more aligned for spiritual entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And is this actually a good time to maybe define what you mean? Who's part of that conversation when you say spiritual entrepreneur?
Yeah. So this came up because a co-collaborator of mine for the Energetics of Money workshop was like, when I think about the word spiritual entrepreneur, like I get what you mean, but for a lot of people, they might be opting themselves out of participating because they're thinking that's a Reiki practitioner or a yoga instructor or an acupuncturist. And so we don't necessarily think about other businesses as being spiritual when they actually are. So even if you are something that is like super nuts and bolts, like very logical based, like I'm thinking accountants, that can still be a spiritual business. And so what I mean by spiritual entrepreneur is that you are able to see that your business is a direct reflection of who you are as a human being on this human plane. And so as you're moving through your own personal blocks and struggles and challenges that might be coming up in relationships or other sort of more standard places that you think about these blocks and challenges coming up, you start seeing that, oh, my business brings up all those same kind of wounds and is an opportunity for me to work through those wounds as well. And so I think like the most obvious place that I would go to is attachment. And so if you are somebody who finds yourself being a bit clingy or what we call anxiously attached in your relationships, when you feel insecure, you might also bring that same sort of strategy and coping mechanism into your business. And so that might look like, as you're feeling a bit insecure in your business, you start overdoing and like maybe taking a look at your bank account too many times, and it's like, maybe
clinging to those outcomes and overworking, or yeah.
And so how you move through that in your relationship is going to be very similar to how you move through that in your business. And so the medicine is the same. And so I think that that's what I mean by spiritual entrepreneur, is it's more about how you approach the business rather than the product that your business promotes.
Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't mean that your services or product don't have to be overtly focused on the spirit by nature, but whether you're a hairstylist or an accountant, or what you bring to your business, how it helps you grow, how it helps you, how much awareness you bring to it, how you navigate your own self-worth, what you have to share, what you want to share with the world, how that is a reciprocal process. So really, if you're bringing a sense of awareness and you're using the opportunity of running a business or developing a business to really grow in your life, then you're a spiritual entrepreneur. Yeah. And we actually have a whole podcast on what is a spiritual business, don't we?
Yeah.
Maybe we'll put that in the show notes.
Definitely we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
And, I think it's important to note that in this process of being a spiritual entrepreneur, like, your woundings are all going to come up, and that is a normal and natural process of this thing we call entrepreneurship. I think that a lot of times people think that, oh, there's something wrong with me, or this business might not be what I'm supposed to do, or a whole array of internal monkey chatter that comes up as you start coming up against these blocks and challenges. And I think part of why I feel so passionate about sharing this message of spiritual entrepreneurship and the fact that your business is a spiritual practice is just to normalize the pain that so many of us feel.
Yeah, and the doubt and instead of thinking, oh yeah, right, something's wrong, it's like, no, what a fantastic platform
and an opportunity.
Business reaches into all those things, how you show up, how you resource yourself, all your fears. Like, it's just such a fantastic platform for spiritual growth, for to use that term. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm glad you're bringing attention to that, and that more people can realize that that's not just a normal, pretty universal process, but actually a really helpful and real opportunity for growth. So, yeah.
And honestly, like, as you start moving through your blocks and challenges, it gives you a chance to show up more authentically with your audience, with the people that you serve in your community. And like, to me, that's like one of the core pillars of the fire element, which is connection, and how it's so difficult to create that genuine and authentic connection if it is being blocked by coping mechanisms or survival strategies or even performance, because that might have helped you survive. Like, how do you show up in, a lot of us market on social media, how do you show up in these very public spaces, showing and sharing a lot of your personal stories as a form of connection rather than manipulation?
Yeah, let's I'm sure there's so much to talk about, and let's dive into the summer season and its elements, and what kind of things might be heightened and supported at this time of year, but even just the nature of the summer, which is it's the summer season, it's warm, it's there's always an organ, a spiritual organ connected in Taoist medicine with the seasons and what's on what's in the position of influence right now is the heart. We call it the heart, but it's also the Shen, which is sort of sometimes translated as the heart mind. And I see it as the decision maker. Sometimes it's called, the benevolent emperor, like it's the organ in charge, that really your true nature, when you're listening to it, when you can sink into, without your nervous system being super activated, when you're not in fight or flight or fawn mode, when you really sink in and have these moments, opportunities, parts of your life where you can sink into the Shen and let it do what it does, that's when you're going to notice, oh, I feel so much like myself when I do this activity.
Yeah.
I know what brings me joy. I know what feels good. I know where to put up boundaries. Like, it really is basically the spiritual intelligence. It's not just there's other organs, for instance, the spring we just passed, it's got the governing, like, I'm going to put a plan in place. It's very logical. We're going to, you can bring those detail-oriented, a little more focused field of view organs into play when you're, doing things that require a little more black and white and organizational. But when you want to look at the big picture of your life, you want to check in with, am I on the right path that feels natural to me, or am I molding myself to what I feel like people expect of me, what I'm trapped into, or stuck in that mode of wanting to please, or I can't get this voice out of my head where I should do this, or I need to unpack my fears around, if I don't keep doing this, it feels wrong, but if I don't do it, I'm going to be homeless and broke, and I'm never going to make money by doing something that is at all joyful, or there's a lot of, when you get that stuff out of the way and you tap into the Shen, then that's the leader that says, oh yeah, here, I know what I'm doing, I know where I'm going. It doesn't have to be, I don't need to see the whole road, but I know that I'm on the right path, and I can authentically share in a way that's not draining to me. I can connect to people. I feel a little more open, and that's what the Shen, I think of it as that the Tao mind. Yeah.
And that was what came to mind as you were speaking. Is it's like the part of you that listens to your Tao, that like can see it, understand it, and is able to hear it. And I think of that as being the heart, or Shen, or heart mind.
And Tao, for anyone who's new to that term, in case this is your first podcast with us, it gets translated as the way or the path. It's also, I think, accurately been said that the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Like, it's something you can't actually put into words. You can closely approximate an explanation, but really it's something that has to be experienced or felt. Yeah. And so it's sort of your personal, your purpose, your life unfolding when you sink into that space without the running narrative of the busy mind. And it's really that full body experience, that wisdom that's there without you trying. That's the Tao.
Yeah. And, I talk about it with my business mentees as it being purpose, but I think that when we use that English word, it turns it into something that we do. And it's sort of this reframing of the Tao, purpose, way, path is more about a being state, an embodied state, rather than it being a doing. I
have to achieve this. I have to go after this.
Yeah, like my Tao, is not my coaching practice. My coaching practice is informed by my Tao, but it is not the singular monolith that is my Tao.
And your Tao and your whatever is your business it's not your identity either. Your purpose, your Tao is not your identity. It's just, you're already that. Is that what you were, no matter what happened in your life?
Yeah. It's like that state of being that you were meant to learn and receive and then project in this lifetime. And it's the thing that you're born into this life.
And constantly trying to adjust to get closer to, this is what I want to share. When you get closer to that, it becomes easier. You might have challenges, you might still be tired at the end of the day, but it's a very different feeling of, I feel really good. This is what I'd like to share and how I'd like to connect with other people. And that will look completely different for everyone, which is the wonderful thing. And and that's summer. I think we talk a lot about the Tao, or that Shen, that heart organ. That's a lot about what's in charge, is about being joyfully reconnected with your true self, and then feeling, because of that, then feeling more open to connect and share with other people who are, hopefully feel a little more in their true selves, and finding even just joy and play.
I want to circle back to the organs, because I think, and I don't want to get like super crazy heavily deep into it, but just giving folks a bit more of the other organs, just like little like blips about them, and
little Coles notes.
So the 3 other organs that are associated with the fire element in summer season are the triple burner, the pericardium, and the small intestine. And at first glance, it's like, okay, so the most obvious one is the pericardium. And I think that all of these organs are supporters of the heart, and they are protecting the heart in a attracting and deflecting sort of way, which is another way that we sort of talk about in terms of attracting the right audience for you. When we talk about niching in our spiritual businesses, a lot of times people have a lot of resistance around niching down, and feel like, if I niche down, then I'm not going to be serving everyone, and therefore, how can I be of service? And the reality is that when you have too wide of a niche, then it's hard to speak to that exact right person who is like who you want to spend your day talking to.
Who's ready to hear from you, who'd like to hear from you. Right. You're not convincing anybody.
Exactly.
You're like, this is what I have to offer. If you want any part of it, here it is. And it's clear what I have to offer. And I love the pericardium for that too, because clarity also comes from having good personal boundaries. I think here's what I have to offer, and here's what you're not going to get from me. You're not going to get an answer on Sunday night. You're not going to get anything and everything you want. Or, there's so many versions where the clearer you are about your boundaries, and that's, the pericardium is that little wrapper around the heart, that little protector. It's like, I protect these boundaries, but so I can continue share. It's not a closing off. It's like, so I can be clear and continue to share without being drained or stepped on or feeling,
And so, if we take it back to the business aspect of it, it's like, it's not just, it's just as important to know what your no is as well as what your yes is. And so having the pericardium is like, using your content and using your voice that you put out, using your conscious marketing as a bouncer for your own protective energy. And so I love the pericardium for that, because that part of you that says, ooh, this person, there's nothing, like I could help this person, but I feel like my energy would be drained if I were to say yes to taking on this client. And so that's your pericardium saying no, and to listen to the wisdom of that no. Or
bringing resentment into your business, which I'm sure many people in all shapes and forms have had some experience with that, where you've just like, you've missed listening to that voice, that boundary overgiven. And now it's like, I resent how much you're asking of me, and it's really great to be able to tap into that and not miss those early cues as well too. So you can just know what your yeses and nos are, and who you take on as clients, or what kind of work you offer for what price. Because it doesn't feel easy and joyful when you're resenting what you do, then that's sort of an interruption in that easy flow of your business.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that is the triple burner, which doesn't really have an organ in Western medicine, but it's the part of us that in Chinese medicine, it warms and is the digestive fire. It's also the connector. So we think about our body in terms of like upper, middle, and lower parts of our torso. And so it's the connective piece that really allows everything to circulate. And when we talk about triple burner type people, we say that they're very magnetizing and you want to be in their presence. And they're sort of like that classic fire element type of a person. And so then on the flip side of the pericardium is the yes. The triple burner gets to be the yes part of you. And so being really, really specific and clear about what you're saying yes to is just as important as the no.
And I think of the triple burner too, it's a bit of the messenger from top to bottom, making sure that the communication that needs to get around the body happens. Sometimes they liken it's not, but sometimes you can think of it a little bit like the fascia or the lymph or something that's going to go whole body. But I think of it as a very integrative organ. It's a communicator, and it integrates all of those things. So when you're making decisions from an integrative place and you're not just letting just your mind or just those worries take control.
I love that.
What are your decisions and what are your answers? Then when you feel it in your body and there's not this disconnect, it's like, well, this is a yes to my body, but I'm going to override that with the fear that I have for this that's just in my mind. And you can feel that sort of like, these 2 parts are different, or these 3 parts, or these 9 parts are different. So it's nice to be able to learn to take an experiential and the more we work on our businesses and ourselves, the more integrative we become, and then the more clear and it's easier to find those yeses and no. It's like, that was a yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that brings us to the small intestine, which I think of as the discerner. And so that is your yes and no. Because if you think about the role that the small intestine has in the body, it takes all that information from the stomach and then is literally saying, yes, this is good for me, and no, this is shit. And so it is the microphylla of your soul work. You get to say yes and no using the help of the pericardium and the triple burner, but the small intestine is the part of you that is actually able to sort through that yes and no and actually put that into action, so that the heart can then feel so safe to be open and to share vulnerably and authentically, while still having these appropriate boundaries in place that help the heart feel safe and help the heart feel like it can still protect the parts of itself that feels very sacred.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think of, obviously when these organs get used in their elemental representative sense, it goes way out beyond what we know that they do from an anatomical, functional sort of sense. But it's interesting, how great I find these metaphors are. And you think of your small intestine, and its job is to decide what gets absorbed and processed and what just passes right on through. And what a wonderful thing. And it has to do that. We have to do that all the time. That's its job. And the summer season is the fire element, which is warming, it's nourishing, we need it. You out and out can't survive without it. But you can also have too much. And I think of the poor real life small intestine, especially in a modern way, where we tend to let too much in or bring in things that we just can't process. And so those little villi in your small intestine can get quite inflamed. And then when they're inflamed, they can't hold their boundaries very well and they get overwhelmed. And that's actually when you get leaky gut, where molecules from your food that are normally too large to pass into the bloodstream because the small intestine can't do its job, they leak in, and then your blood is going, whoa, that's not supposed to be here. I'm gonna freak out a little. And I feel like emotionally, energetically, how is that process going in your life? If we can only bring in and let in so much. Are you being overwhelmed? Do you need to rest and repair a little bit? Is there too much of that fire coming and burning you out? So it's just, I find it so interesting. I think it's a great metaphor for that.
Yeah. And if I can just bring in an example of how this can look like in a business setting, I shared this answer on my Instagram page this month, and it was the question that I was starting to see. Interesting that this question started showing up so much in the summer season, around how much of my life should I be sharing on social media? There are things that I feel like would be really connecting to my audience, but it seems so vulnerable for me to share, and I'm not sure if I feel safe sharing it, or, even so feeling like I might be oversharing if I share this. And then also on the flip side of like, I'm not sharing enough because all my things are basically just like very logic based. And how do I start sharing in a more, personal sort of way? And this is where, for me, and I added this preface in the Instagram as well, is like, this is advice. Please take it or leave it. Feel into your body what feels good.
Yeah, not universal.
Before you take anyone's advice. But for me, my own personal discernment around this is, I share a lot on Instagram. Like, y'all are on my road trip that is my life with me, and about my boyfriend and my dog and all the horses that I get to play with, and when personal things come up, I do share. But the discernment piece that I have for myself is I never share something that is out of regulation still. And so if some big event, or even a small event that feels really dysregulating to my nervous system comes up, my immediate place is not to go to social media, because I think that there's a lesson in this for y'all. My immediate response is, how can I get my own nervous system to feel safe around this, and help my own sort of processing and inner children and all of the parts of me that feels unsafe, essentially. How can I support that part? And then if there is something that at the end of it feels clarified enough that I feel like would be helpful to my very specific ideal client audience, then that's when I come up and share. And so this isn't to say you aren't asking for support. Like, I'm definitely asking for support. Oftentimes I'm calling up Christina, or I'm leaning on producer Andre or my boyfriend Sean to just hold space for me. But to me, it's really, really important to have that specific discernment, because a lot of us are care providers. And so our audience is coming to us asking for support. And so if I were to show up in that space with something that I needed supported, then it creates a unfair space for folks who may potentially want to be a client of mine in the future, because I'm asking them to take care of me, essentially, when they are asking me to take care of them. And so I ask for that care elsewhere, so that I can then come at these spaces in social media, newsletter, and in all of my offerings and containers with really clear and aligned energy. And so that's sort of like how this heart, small intestine, pericardium, triple burner, you can see how all of those parts of me have to come online to be able to hold space in that way.
And make those decisions. I also loved, I think in that post, you also had something nice to, one of the, I think, markers for you too was, am I sharing this because I feel like I owe people an explanation, which I thought was a really good check-in. Do you feel like you owe something to, are you sharing because you feel this sense of obligation or obliged? And I think so many of us out there are learning to navigate this new world, like the new world. You can tell how old I am.
New to us.
Other people are just born right into it, but recent on the human timeline. But even still, even if you've grown up with it, this is where these utilizing these elements of these skill cells, these boundaries, the heart mind, how do you check in with yourself, because those boundaries are going to look so different for every individual. How do you check in with yourself to start laying the groundwork, knowing what your yes is and what your no is, because summer season is about also being a little more sharing and open. It's not the time in winter. It's like we say it's a good time to be a little more quiet, withdraw a little bit, have a little more hibernation. In the summer, it's like, hey, it's warm. We're wearing less things. We're running around. Like
We're sharing.
We're sharing. It's a time to get together, have festivals. Like it's a very communal, open, free, and easy sort of feeling to it. And so, yeah, in your messaging, this might be a really good time of year to work on communication with your audience, whether that's working on who is my audience, how do I define who I want to talk to, then to what kind of messages do I want to share. And when all those organs are online, again, you know what to share when it's a free and easy, this is my message, here you go, versus, okay, I better put this on there. And I also think, it's okay. Maybe there's other people who are in a position where it's okay to ask for a little help online too, but it's going to be so different for anyone. And for you, when that's what type of share, what type of asking, what type of give and take in this weird virtual world, because it is a very communal world, despite not being face to face. It can be amazing.
Yeah.
You get to decide, but those decisions always feel more regulating and more clear when you've dropped into like that integration of whole body.
Yeah.
My boundaries are protected.
Yeah.
This is coming from my heart mind space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that you mentioned winter and how that's like a time to pause, and I think that this would be a good time to actually talk about the pause of summer, which nobody really ever talks about.
Right.
And I'm feeling that in my own body and in my own sphere of like, winter is when we pause to like nourish our roots and go internal. It's a very yin time,
a very passive receiving time.
Yeah.
I think I was saying where that nourishment, you quiet down and I see it more of a very yin, a very filling up the vessel kind of pause where you're quiet enough. You're not expending so much energy. Your pause is kind of like coming in and filling you up, and you're taking a rest. Yeah. Whereas summer is the yang phase. I think hopefully everyone who's listened to this podcast knows the basics of yin and yang by now. But that, that yang pause looks very different.
Yeah. And I think about that yang pause as being a very playful pause. And, that is the emotion of the season is joy. And so play is something that I think that is, underappreciated in our culture. And it's something that I'm, as a I'm 37 now. As a 37-year-old, I feel like I'm just starting to learn the medicine of play.
Right. Again, because you knew it in the beginning.
Yeah, because I grew up in a family that play wasn't very encouraged, and so productivity and
gold star.
Yes, all those stereotypes about Asian families, it was true for my family. And so I'm on the ranch here, and the other day Sean and I went out and jumped on the trampoline, and I was like, I don't know how to jump on a trampoline. And so it's this idea of play being medicine, and so you need to be able to pause to be able to take that medicine. And this always goes back to nervous system regulation for me, and you cannot play without feeling safe in your nervous system. And I see this in Ruby. We've been traveling a lot, and it always takes her about a day or so to reacclimate to a
Ruby,
new...
your dog.
Yeah, Ruby, my dog. To acclimate to a new space and to a new surroundings. And she's always kind of like a little bit on edge for that first like 24, 36 hours. And then after that, she's like, let's play.
Yeah, she's a joyful girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks different. You can tell if she doesn't feel comfortable or quite sure of her surroundings. That's not happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And play is necessary for creativity in business. Mm-hmm. And so like just to like bring it into like somatics a bit, like winter stillness and pause is like bundling up and making soup and sitting in front of the fire and sharing stories with really close loved ones.
Lying down.
Yeah. Lying down, which is Peach's favorite.
Lying down, all the bath, all the slightly, all the things that are that quiet pause. Yeah.
And then in the summertime, I'm like taken back to a few years back where Andre and I used to have a tiny plot of land where we farmed out of and fed a lot of families out of, actually. And there's so much work between like January and like July, and like all the planting of the seeds and the moving around of soil and, churning the soil up with chicken manure. Like there's a lot of energy that goes into those first few months. And then there's this beautiful time in like mid-July to like August, and I'm thinking like Pacific Northwest terms.
Sure, yeah.
Where the garden just stills. And like the plants are just in full green. And we used to also have flowers, and so like the flowers are in full bloom. Everything is about just like sit back and watch me, and so that's the energy of the pause, where like the bees are buzzing and you're just sitting in like gratitude and like feeling so at place and at home because of all the work that you've been able to do.
But it's still time to pause, which is interesting. And the yang will always have a little more kinetic energy, a little more momentum, but it's still, we don't just go all season long, all 24 hours long without any rest. And one of those pauses that's obvious in our human cycle is nighttime, wintertime would be its equivalent, where you're sleeping. And then sort of midday too, the heart actually comes online at noon, at lunchtime, and it's midday, and that kind of pause. And I love your garden example, because there's sort of this beautiful visibility that's also built into that, where it's like, I've been working hard. Let's have gratitude and appreciate. Look at how juicy I am. Look at, let's show off, let's remind you what I'm here for. Let's be me as a peony or a carrot, because that's what I do, and I don't have to try really hard to be a carrot or a peony. And I think even in your business, when you find that momentum, like, let's just also not forget to take these moments of appreciation for, no matter where you're at in the timeline, like, oh, if I can appreciate, this is how I'm showing up right now, this is what I want to look like. That summer season of your business kind of looks like that, and it is what you see a little more of. And I want to circle back to the play too, because coming from also a creative background as well as an acupuncture and Chinese medicine background, there's things, we look at, so many people naturally want to take a vacation in summertime. This is when we pause. Not everybody gets to, but it's very traditional to want to do that. We instinctively want to, this isn't the time where it's like, okay, I'm going to get and I want you to share your example. Like, there's certain things that just, you're not feeling like super jazzed necessarily. You've noticed people don't feel super jazzed to do certain aspects of their business, whether it's planning or certain phases. You might feel like that's more of a push in the summer, and you're like, and that can be, we get very hard on ourselves when we don't take into account that there are going to be cycles and rhythms through your business. And this, one of the weird things that have been introduced in a modern lifestyle is this expectation that things are going to be the same no matter what time of day it is,
Right.
no matter what time of year it is. And this is why I feel so passionate about this series of bringing in these examples from nature where it's showing us that's not how life works.
Yeah.
That's the human sort of ego taking over and saying we're just, production for production's sake. And then people feel bad.
Yeah.
Like, I feel lazy in the summer. I just want to, I feel so guilty. I would like to go hang out by the cool lake for a little while. And then you start to feel bad about yourself. But what if you, especially as entrepreneurs, what if you design that into your business, into your season where okay, spring I do this, I feel really good about it. There's going to be an energy push. And then in summer, it's like, I'm going to build in this certain period of time where I do these activities and not these activities, or I go away, or
Yeah. And, what we were reflecting on this morning as we were talking about this is I planned my really big launches. I didn't intentionally do this way, but like I have intuitively planned my big launches to be in fall and spring, because those are the times that I feel the most like I'm able and capable of and have the capacity to give a lot more and to show up a lot more. In the summertime, especially, this is the really wonderful thing about YinYang Medicine is, I can't remember the exact vocabulary from Chinese medicine school, but is it transmutation, where it's like you go to an extreme form of yang and then it shifts into the yin?
Yeah. I forget how you describe that too. But yeah, it goes to its extreme end where it turns into its opposite. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like we see here, the chickens are tired in the middle of the day. Yeah. And Christina is obsessed with Pepsi, the turkey who lives here on the ranch.
She's a turkey who loves hugs, just so you know. You see all sorts of things you don't see in the city.
Yeah. And so, like, in the middle of the day, if Christina goes out to go look for Pepsi's hiding out somewhere taking a little siesta.
She's in the shade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
And I feel like in our culture, we look at that and we go, oh, that's how lazy.
Yeah.
And when you come to a place, maybe it's a little more subtle in Vancouver, but it still applies. But if you come to a place like Nevada in June, there is a very clear reason why, and it's so wonderful to see the animals doing what they do, because they don't overthink it. No. They don't. This is a very instinctual, this is what I should do now.
Yeah.
And it's a built-in survival wisdom. Yeah. It's that Tao wisdom. Like, this is what I know, not because I had to learn it, not because someone told me. Mm-hmm. When it's, in the morning, it's really quite pleasant. Yeah. The sun comes up. And then by midday, there's a period of time where if you're out in the sun and you're busy doing things that you were busy chickening or rabbiting or doing, you're caught out there in the sun, like, you're going to get scorched. Yeah. And now actually you're going to suffer. Mm-hmm. And I found that so fascinating. Like, what a great example. And that's the extreme end also of the summer energy, and the fire element is... And so interesting that there is this pause in the midday, maybe to digest your lunch, maybe to get out of the sun, maybe to take a break from thinking, because you can't go from morning to night in your business without a little rest and recuperation. Yeah. But if you push and push and push and insist on that yang kinetic energy, it's extreme, like, it's going to start to burn, and it's either going to start to burn out or be inflamed, and that's where we start to get in trouble. So that natural example of like, hey, we don't go. There's a period of time where it's nice to be warm, but you can be too warm. Yeah. It's nice to be busy and have results, but you can be too busy, and you can be results oriented to the point where it's going to now start to do damage.
Yeah. And just be focused on the outcomes. And then we sort of get into, I think that this is where we've fallen into toxic capitalism, is because we don't acknowledge that actually when we get to the far ends of yang, we need to cycle into a yin, and we expect actually to just continue on that yang cycle. And in nature, I mean, chickens are like the dumbest creatures on
They're
earth.
not smart.
Yeah, and even chickens know this, and somehow humans think we're smarter.
Yeah.
And we burn ourselves out on
Yeah.
just running on yang all the time. And so the medicine actually of summer, ironically, is to rest.
Yeah.
And to take a pause and
Yeah.
to align with your heart.
Yeah.
to
And
get
make
clear
it joyful
discernment.
so
Yeah.
that you feel good about the doing that you do.
Yeah.
You drop into the joy of what you naturally are as a being, and then when you do from that place, it's easier. It's not such a drain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to not feel guilty and odd. And that's one of the interesting things. Also, seasonality, when we talk about the seasons, it brings in this element, I think, that doesn't come into business in quite the same way, is this element of time. And like when I think of the cycles of the day, like now it's time to do this, now it's time, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat lunch, I'm going to do, we've talked many times about the natural cycles of the planting seasons versus the growing seasons. Yeah. And I hope that becomes more part of the instinctive part of running a business, or what's talked about in conversations around setting up your business, is this element of cycles and seasonality where, just everything we just said, where you don't expect everything to be on a straight up trajectory, go, go, go for all time, without building in these aspects and being mindful of, how do you want to set up your day? When do you function best?
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to have the same internal clock. The coyotes do something different than the chickens, and who are you in your business, and how does that work for you? Do you know that you can do a bunch of client calls from this time, and then this time you're going to run out of energy, and how you get to have these. You get to have this choice about, how do I set up my day?
Yeah. And I love that you brought it around to that, because I was just having a conversation with one of my clients around, what is a day, what does a week look like? And she was asking me specifically what my week looks like. And I think people are often surprised, because I do talk about rest so much. Often, I think of that as an influence from you, Christina.
Thank you, mostly Yin. Very comfortable.
Yeah. But actually, the way that my nervous system feels best is if my brain is on one thing per day. And so I have 3 days where I see clients, and those days are long. They tend to be 10 to 12
yes,
hour
I've witnessed.
days.
That's a long schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 10 to 12 hour day for me. But then I have a half day of office work, and then I have the rest of the week off. But for me, I'm a manifesting generator, for those of you who ascribe to the human design stuff. But to me, it's my brain operates the best when it's on just one track at a time. I can't switch from doing client calls to scheduling to,
Me too. Yeah.
recording a podcast to it doesn't work for me that way.
Yeah.
And so I think that, again, here's a beautiful permission for you to actually look at what works best for you and your body. I also take, even on those days that I'm working 10 to 12 hour days, I know that my body does not like to work between 2 and 3:30. And so I have a nice long lunch break in between there, where sometimes I'll eat lunch, go for a walk, take a nap. And so permission to fully step into what feels most in alignment for you and your body, and stepping out of the model of you have to work 9 to 5. And it has to look this very specific way. Yeah.
7 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're running your own show, no one decides those steps for you. And and I can also speak to, it's been so wonderful to be here and witness how you set up your day, because we've been here, but as you say, we're not living vacations, this is your life. And it's so wonderful to watch. I'm sure after much experimentation and time, we also used to work together in a totally different setup and structure. And to see that you've managed to find what works for you. And I see you getting, lots of work in, I'm using quotation marks for audio, like lots of work in deeply engaged with your clients and full energy for that, even though there's maybe it's a full day of that, but you feed yourself, you get, you have these micro breaks that work for you at the times of day that works for you. You're out playing with the horses, and, it's this full life where your work and your life are, maybe they're different activities, but it's all Kat's life.
Yeah.
And it works in a way that sustains you and then spills it, because it sustains you, then it spills out as benefit to other people. And just for anyone who's new to that, I mean, including, I'm still in slightly an experimental phase. I've learned a lot in the last little while, but it can take don't expect to know that just in a day, maybe necessarily. No. Again, for this this element of time, this element of seasons, things don't get talked about enough. People could look at you right now and think, gosh, it's been about a week and I've journaled, my food and my sleep and maybe what works, and I just don't have it nailed yet, or I still feel tired, or I want to change. Yeah. Things do take time and experimentation, and it's okay. I want to just put it out there that there's a process to things, so don't expect to, and don't feel bad if you don't have that totally sorted out, month 2 of being an entrepreneur, or just, starting to experiment. Things do take, and it's individual, so there's no model for you to look at and say, okay, that's what works for that person. Yeah. For you, I do too. I like to deep dive into activity and then separate things out and focus. Yeah. For other people, they might find it quite refreshing to switch tasks throughout the day. So again, how are you going to know this? Only you can know this, and only you can know this truly from a place where your nervous system is regulated and you've dropped into that heart mind, the Shen that we're talking about. And the summer is when all of this is in charge. So this is a great time to experiment with those things and sink more deeply into that wisdom, and have that be at your higher in energetics, at your support. Yeah.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that we all play the comparison game. And, it's easy to look at what my business looks like now, and Empowered Curiosity has been in business for about 2 years now, and it's grown tremendously in those 2 years. But what y'all didn't see was the 13 years before that, where I was running my own business and struggling with money wounds and struggling with boundaries and how to set up my schedule, and not really having a ton of guidance in that space, which is why I feel so passionate about teaching this now, because I went through such a hard, decade-long experimentation of how do I make this this work-life balance thing work?
Starting maybe with the realization that you actually get to choose to have a work-life, sometimes the assumption is, I have to do it that way because that's how I was doing it, or that's how it's taught. Yeah.
And I'm a really, really big advocate for having a life that you don't need a vacation from. And that was one of the things that I love about being on the road and living the digital nomadic life, is that, my work folds into my life and supports my life instead of the other way around.
And that could sound probably very scary for, you also have to have very good boundaries to know when it's, I think a lot of people struggle with when it's, especially if you're working from home more recently, what is work time and what is my time? And that's an interesting boundary where they get to be not so distinct. Everything is part of your life. But again, there's still going to be boundaries around when I do this. So that clarity, oddly enough, those strong boundaries allow things to integrate more seamlessly and become a whole life, rather than having to, I need a separate, I need work to be work and I need my life to be life. And it still might look, you still might want to have a separate space to go to, everyone's going to be a bit different, but oddly enough, having clear boundaries that are true for yourself will help integrate what a life you don't need to vacation from looks like.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that this is where a lot of people get sort of stuck in the head and in logic land of like, this is what my life should look like, or this is what people have taught me, so this is what I should do.
Right. This is what make other people happy, so...
Yeah, or make other people a lot of money, so I'm going to try to replicate that thing that made that person a lot of money. And, you know, I think that this is where somatics is so, so important, because even starting out with like, when do you want to rest in the day? And when do you want to eat in the day? And you start listening to those subtle cues from your body in the very, very beginning stages. That's what it looks like. And then building your schedule around that. And then seeing how you feel in terms of like your energy levels and your ability to give and be of service. Like shifts and changes, even just with those two things.
That's a great place to start, because things will spiral out from there. Like even if you know how much sleep you need dictates when you get up in the morning, which will dictate how much time you have for certain tasks that you'd like to do. So yeah, it's great to just start. Once you pull on one thread, it will sort of unravel into a good clear picture.
Yeah, and then having flexibility around that too. You know, because
and not being rigid like all year long. It has to be the same.
Exactly. Because like a good example is my schedule here in Nevada is very different from my schedule when I'm in California or in Vancouver. Because it is so hot in the middle of the day.
It's hot.
So I schedule all my clients between 11 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And then I get to have the morning where I get to be outside and play with the chickens and take care of the animals. And then in the evening, I get to play with the horses or go for a bike ride with Christina and, you know, go take pictures of the moon.
We have adventures and have fun, and it's pleasant to be outside and enjoy that breeze and that beauty. Yeah,
and that's a very, very different schedule from the rest of my time. And so being aware of, like, what your body is going to want to crave during certain times of the year. You guys might not be traveling the way that I am, but like if you are, then getting a chance to like feel into like, oh, so what's my body going to crave at that particular location, and taking care of your body first, I feel like is like one of my main pillars of my business is like, how do I take care of my body so that I can show up?
And everything you described also, it all hinges off an awareness, like just starting with that. And I think that's the sort of the foundation of the spiritual entrepreneur, this sort of, you just start bringing more and more awareness to why you do what you do, how you do it, and everything builds from there. And also the more and more people that are able to do that, the more and more wonderful examples we get to look at to realize what your choices are, what business can look like, what the myriad of options are. Nature loves to be creative. The colors, the variety. I mean, coming here down to the desert, I'm from the Pacific Northwest where it's very green and very wet, and both places are so different and they're so equally beautiful. And we were just marveling the other day at the diversity of different landscapes. And you get to be so creative. All of our life stories, our little pockets of how we get to express what's true, what's true to you about, there's going to be this truth that comes out and you get to show it in your own individual way. And the more, just starting with that awareness, then you get to do it for yourself, and then you get to model it for other people too, so they get permission that they can be themselves. Yeah.
And I think really like that's the path of the spiritual entrepreneur is like, don't just break out of the box just to break out of the box. Like, figure out what feels in alignment for you and approach your business like it is a spiritual practice, because if you're feeling triggered, if you're feeling wounded by certain things that are coming up in your business, it is an opportunity to like dig in a little bit deeper and ask yourself, okay, so when have I felt this before? How has this shown up? How has this protected me in the past? And to do that deeper level work instead of just bypassing and shooting yourself and shaming yourself. So I think that that's really like what
Absolutely.
Just to circle it back to like that beginning of the conversation of like, that's what a spiritual entrepreneur does.
Yeah.
And you could do that whether you're an accountant or attorney
100%.
or a Reiki healer.
Yeah, absolutely. It applies to anything and everything, because whatever you do, it will ask those questions of you. And again, I just feel the need to emphasize the permission slip that this stuff can take time, and that's okay. And it's not, you're never wasting time, whatever stage you're at, if you keep bringing awareness to it. Even if you're repeating things, you're like, I feel like I've learned that lesson before. It's okay. Like that, totally. These every day, that's what spiritual practice also means.
Yeah.
Every day you are learning something, you're aware of something, you might be repeating it. Every day that's why it's a practice. Not a home run, like a once in a lifetime, like an end destination. I will be spiritual once I reach this.
Yeah.
What my business looks like, what I have in my head. No, every day that you're even being challenged with things that you are finding unpleasant, that's what the practice is that you get to practice, and there's no finish line. Every day brings something new.
Yeah.
And thank you, Summer, for the heart mind to sort of guide us through. It may take a while, but just keep coming back to that heart space of that wisdom.
Absolutely. Oh, I feel like that's a good wrap up, Christina.
Summer in a nutshell. I'm so glad you're having these conversations about seasons in business, because it brings up, I think, so many things that just don't get talked about. And, like you said, we could talk about, nitty gritty of, I don't know, money building practices or social media tactics and things. But if you don't have that foundation of regulating yourself and knowing how you operate in the world and what works for you, then those steps will just keep coming back to those hiccups.
Absolutely. And I think that, one of the reasons why I feel so aligned to talk about it in terms of nature is it's because it's a remembrance. I can give you an example about nature and you like immediately get it because you have a body that has felt, at least can understand what that feels like in nature. And so, we can talk about these tangible concepts and then apply them in, whether it's business or your relationship or, branching off from business into social media marketing or, whatever it is, it always comes back to nature to me.
Yeah, solid example. And maybe get outside in nature in summer and just come look at some chickens if you have the opportunity. They'll teach you a lot, even though they're not so bright. that they don't need to be. The wisdom is there.
I feel like watching chickens is a spiritual practice in and of itself.
I think so.
Yeah, they're quite
any animal.
creatures.
Any animal. It's fascinating.
It's true. I spend hours just being on the pasture with the horses, not really, writing or asking them to do anything. Like I just sit out there and just like interact with them and be a part of the herd, and you learn so much.
And if you're in the city like I am, even watching some birds and the things they do that are not what I would do, and it just just sitting and watching, it's a very therapeutic, and I think remembrance is a great word. You're like, oh yeah, there's a cycle, there's a season, and here they are without second guessing. This is them doing what they're doing, and how do I bring more of that into my life?
Yeah. So, Christina, how can folks find you on the internet world?
It's pretty elusive right now, but probably the best place is, this will evolve over time, but at the moment it would probably be my Instagram account, which is just my name, Christina.Cecconi, which you can see the show notes on how that's spelt. And that would be a good place to follow what's coming up.
Yeah. And one of the many talents that Christina has is as a photographer. So she's laughing, but she does take really lovely photos. So she's been taking these amazing photos of the desert landscape.
Oh, that's a fun expression. Yeah, most of my photos will be of nature. So yeah, because that is my teacher, and it's fun to see that. And then you're going to be seeing a lot more of what I would term the meditative arts, which is any kind of practice that has a creative or artistic element, but that is really, again, a meditative practice in and of itself that brings you into that space of awareness. So my background is also creativity, so any creative practice that brings me back to that Tao is what I've been enjoying. So yeah.
Wonderful. And if you are curious about how to dive in deeper into this work around business as a spiritual practice, my wait list for Business Alchemist Mentorship will be open by the time that this podcast airs. So the next Circle Council is going to gather in September, but I am taking deposits now. And so if you wanted to hop on and schedule a connection call with me and just see if it's the right space for you, there's no pressure at all to sign up. And it can just be this really clarifying, connecting conversation as a spiritual entrepreneur. And so you're welcome to hop on my website, empoweredcuriosity.com, sign up for the wait list. Or if you're wanting to take that a little bit further, you can sign up and book a connection call, and then we can chat for 30 minutes. And if that feels in alignment, you can throw down a deposit and be a part of the next council. I've already gotten 20% of those spaces filled, and I haven't really advertised them yet, so I imagine those spaces are going to go quickly. So
that looks like a fun group to be part of.
It's so much fun. Oh my god, I love the women who said yes already. It's going to be so good. Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me down to Nevada. I'm so glad. Wow, what a treat to be in person.
I know, we got to record in person.
And how perfect for summer when it's all about human connections. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, friend.
Yay, thank you, friend.